In the cold winter of 1964, President Lyndon B. Johnson declared an official war on poverty. As a result of this declaration, the US adopted a threshold or measurement to identify who was poor called the official poverty measure or the poverty threshold. The poverty measurement is a measurement that helps determine the level of income needed to cover basic needs. Basic needs were defined as being 3 times the cost of a minimum food diet in 1963. Those whose households with income below the income needed to meet basic needs are considered poor. 58 years later, the US still uses this measurement to identify the poor. This inaccurate measurement is also used to determine policy, budgeting, and income qualifications for public assistance programs for the poor. The system is broken and out of date for 2022. The United States needs to adopt a new poverty measure that is based on economic needs, current conditions, and addresses the multifaceted lives of the poor living in the US. The threshold of poverty is broken because it fails to address a human's needs to thrive, not just survive, explained in poverty as just meeting basic needs and not well-being misses the point. David Brandy, professor in the School of Public Policy and director of the Plum Initiative on Global and Regional Poverty at the University of California, Century Foundation, says there is a difference between well-being and poverty. As economist and philosopher Amartya Sen persuasively explains, poverty is a shortage of resources, and a shortage of resources usually triggers low well-being. Yet some people have low well-being without being poor, and some are poor without low well-being. Well-being may include health, life satisfaction, food insecurity, access to decent healthcare, for example, or a neighborhood with minimal pollution. As Sen explains, poverty is not a matter of low well-being, but of the inability to pursue well-being precisely because of the lack of economic means. Purchasing well-being is a need, and money is a resource that enables this purchase. Hence, poverty usually undermines well-being, and this is why we care about poverty. But a lack of resources to meet needs is not well-being per se. Poverty and the threshold that defines it isn't just hurting our society socially, but also economically, explained by The Price We Pay for Poverty in the US, Henry J. Holzer, Georgetown University, Urban Institute, in the article, The Economic Cost of Poverty in the United States, the subsequent effects of children growing up in poverty. As told, we estimate that the cost to America associated with childhood poverty total $5 billion per year, which is the equivalent of nearly 4% gross domestic product. In other words, we could raise our overall consumption of goods, services, and quality of life by $500 billion a year if childhood poverty were eliminated. If anything, this calculation undermines the true annual losses associated with US poverty. Poverty seems to affect those who have been identified as poor by the inaccurate threshold, and also a lot more people who are just above the thresholds described in inaccurate poverty measures provide less help for those not considered poor, but who still face life hardships. Hannah Matthews, Deputy Executive Director for Policy at the Center for Law and Social Policy. Moreover, there's evidence that families just above the poverty line experience material hardship at similar rates to families with income just below it. In 2017, Urban Institute surveyed 60% of near poor adults reported experiencing at least one material hardship, such as food insecurity, missed payments for utility bills, or rent or mortgage, or problems with paying family medical bills, which was not significantly different from adults with incomes below the poverty line. Solutions are possible and new narratives can be formed. Adopting a new measure that doesn't need congressional approval. Kaylin Tomhav, a researcher at the Program of Inequality at the Institute for Policy Studies, Rethinking the Poverty Measure, December 3rd, 2020, the incoming Biden administration doesn't need Congress in order to adopt a new measure, not only to get the numbers right, but to start turning the page on the current narrative of economic instability. Admitting that current statistics grossly underestimate the number of people who face dire economic circumstances in the US will be tough, as it goes against the story we tell ourselves as the US as the land of prosperity and opportunity. It would indicate that people may be poor not because of their own choices, but because of the systems of low wage labor and discrimination.